Welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
Yeah.
Have you ever really stopped to think why vampires, after centuries, still have such a hold on our imagination? Seriously, you look
Right.
anywhere from ancient folklore right up to like modern movies,
Yeah,
and these creatures just won't say dead. What is it about them?
it's a great question. It really is remarkable, their staying power. So today, yeah, we're doing a deep dive into how the vampire has evolved. We've got a really fantastic range of sources for you, everything from old folk tales, literary reviews, academic takes, and, cultural commentary on film and TV.
Right. And our mission really is to sift through all that and pull out the key nuggets of knowledge, the surprising bits about these immortal beings. We want to trace their journey, see how they changed, and maybe figure out what these bloodsuckers actually tell us about ourselves.
Yeah.
Our fears, what we desire, how society shifts. It should be pretty revealing.
Absolutely. And having such a wide range of sources is crucial, isn't it? It lets us connect the dots, see how the vampire myth isn't static at all. It's constantly adapting, kind of reflecting us back to ourselves as we change through history. It's like they evolve right alongside us.
Okay, so let's dig into that. Let's go way back to the monstrous origins. Before the capes and the brooding, vampires were, well, they were born from fear, right?
Yeah.
Fear of things people just couldn't explain. What were those really deep-seated fears that first created these monsters?
Exactly. It's fascinating how people tried to make sense of things they just didn't understand. Take plagues, for example. Devastating. Whole families might die off really quickly. The logical jump for them wasn't, oh, it's a virus. It was the first person who died must have come back, returned as a revenant, basically a reanimated corpse to prey on the living. And this fear, it was probably amplified when they sometimes exhumed bodies and saw things like hair or nails appearing longer or the burial shroud looking chewed, just added to the horror.
And it wasn't only plagues feeding this fear, was it? The sources mention actual diseases like rabies. The symptoms insomnia, aggression, avoiding light, avoiding water sound eerily like vampire traits. There's even talk about porphyria, that blood disorder, extreme sun sensitivity, facial changes, maybe even avoiding garlic because the sulfur hurt. Can you imagine having that when nobody understood medicine?
Oh, absolutely. It's quite chilling to think how real symptoms became the bedrock for supernatural belief. And people with porphyria might have had other reasons to fear things like Christian symbols, especially during times like the Inquisition. Fear leading to accusations, maybe even being burned as a vampire. These real afflictions, filtered through an age without science, just fit the myth perfectly.
The folklore itself was incredibly varied too, depending on where you were. What can these regional differences tell us?
Oh, definitely. Huge variations. In Slavic areas, for instance, the Upir wasn't just any monster. It was often seen as a dead heretic, or even the child of a witch and a werewolf. So you see, their fears weren't just about random monsters, but about the corruption of faith, blurring the lines between human and, well, beast. And they had very specific ways to destroy them. Holy water, staking, cutting off the head, burning. And there was that widespread belief, wasn't there, that an animal, like a cat or dog, jumping over a dead body could turn it into a revenant. Shows how even ordinary things could seem sinister.
So if you suspected a vampire was around, people had these really elaborate, sometimes grim methods to try and keep them buried. How did they even identify one, let alone stop it?
Well, desperation bred some creative methods. To find the grave. One way involved a virgin boy leading a virgin stallion through the cemetery. The idea was the horse would refuse to walk over that specific grave, almost like dousing for evil, or finding unexplained holes in the ground above a grave. That was a bad sign. And the corpse itself, maybe looking too healthy, too plump. Sometimes accounts mention fresh blood around the mouth, or even poltergeist activity linked to the grave. Imagine digging someone up and they look healthier than when they died.
It's wild the lengths they went to just to prevent one rising. What about those prevention tactics?
Exactly. Things like burying the body upside down. The hope was that it would get confused and dig down instead of up. Or severing tendons in the knees to, well, physically stop it walking. And then there's the seed counting thing, scattering poppy seeds or millet or sand. The belief was the vampire would be compelled, almost obsessively, to count every single grain. It would keep them occupied all night until sunrise. It's kind of a strangely poetic defense against pure terror, right? Putting things like scythes or sickles in the grave was common too, maybe to appease the spirit or just ward off evil. The Romani used steel needles in the heart, or bits of steel in the mouth and eyes, a belief in iron's power. And then there's that really gruesome find in Venice from the 16th century, a female corpse with a brick forced into her mouth. Archaeologists think it was literally to stop her chewing her shroud and potentially spreading plague, a form of vampire slaying.
Wow, just wow. The sheer terror driving that, it's hard to fathom.
Mhm.
But okay, if prevention failed, what about actually destroying one that was already causing trouble?
Staking was common, yes, but what you staked with often mattered. Ashwood in Russia, hawthorn in Serbia, oak in Silesia, sometimes aspen, if they believed Christ's cross was made from it. It really shows how local beliefs were woven into their defenses. Decapitation was big in German and West Slavic regions. Cut off the head, bury it somewhere else, thought it helped the soul move on, stop reanimation. And the ultimate solution, burning the body completely. To ashes, scatter them. That was seen as the most absolute way to make sure it stayed gone.
So all these deep-rooted folk fears eventually bled into literature, didn't they? And that started a huge shift from these sort of local ghouls to a figure that became a cultural phenomenon that really shaped our modern idea of a vampire.
That's the key transition, yeah. It arguably kicks off in 1819 with John Polidori's The Vampire. So important, because he gives us Lord Ruthven, an aristocratic vampire, seductive, charming, dangerous, a total departure from the, mud-caked peasant revenants of folklore. Ruthven was famously inspired by Lord Byron, his lifestyle, his scandals, and the story was an instant hit. Huge influence.
And then came Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu in 1872, which is crucial, even if less famous than Dracula maybe. It came before Dracula, influenced it quite a bit. First-person view, that sense of creeping dread, even a kind of prototype Van Helsing character. But Carmilla did something else too, didn't it? Something pretty bold for Victorian times.
Oh, it absolutely did. Carmilla is really significant for its unsettling sexual charge, as one source puts it. There's a clear lesbian subtext between Carmilla, the vampire, and Laura, her victim. It wasn't just straightforward horror, it explored this mutual yet forbidden attraction. It was challenging norms by looking at female desire, even a kind of dark female power. And it hinted at deeper things, too, psychologically. Carmilla as this seductive, dangerous part of ourselves that draws us in, even though it could destroy us.
But, okay, when we think of the vampire image,
Yeah.
the one that really stuck, the archetype we still recognize instantly, that has to be Bram Stoker's Dracula, 1897. What did he lock in place that became so iconic?
Dracula is the bedrock, really. He codified so much. The cape, the fangs, changing into a bat or wolf or mist. Powers over storms, command over the dead, that mesmerizing gaze. Stoker built this figure of immense, terrifying power. But, importantly, he also gave him specific rules, limitations. Needing an invitation to enter, only changing shape at certain times, noon, sunset, sunrise. Needing his home soil to stay strong. And the weaknesses. Garlic, the stake, beheading, fire, holy symbols, holy water. Though it's interesting that classic weakness to sunlight, that's more of a modern movie thing. It wasn't really a major part of Stoker's original Dracula.
Right. And we should probably clear up that misconception about Vlad the Impaler. Stoker borrowed the name Dracula, maybe a couple of historical details, but his count isn't meant to be Vlad. Stoker himself pointed out that Dracula meant devil in Wallachian. He was aiming for pure supernatural evil, not a historical biography.
Exactly. And this powerful, monstrous image Stoker created, it had a massive impact, but sometimes in quite problematic ways, too. Take F.W. Murnau's 1922 silent film Nosferatu. It adapted Dracula, but Count Orlok was depicted with these exaggerated features, long nose, bushy eyebrows that were undeniably based on anti-Semitic stereotypes of Eastern European Jews. It fed into xenophobia, portraying the vampire as this foreign contagion, spreading disease and hatred. A really stark reminder of how monster myths can be twisted for ugly purposes.
So as we move into the 20th century, the vampire starts to change again, quite profoundly, actually. We go from these figures of pure terror or, problematic stereotypes to something more complicated, maybe even sympathetic.
That's a really key shift. Mid-20th century, you start getting the tragic vampire, a figure who's often caught between good and evil. They start making us feel pity, not just fear. Maybe it reflected a kind of post-war cultural mood, more interest in psychology, inner conflict. These vampires often seem to hate what they were. They long for redemption, to be made pure again, as one source described it.
You definitely see that with Barnabas Collins in Dark Shadows. He was tormented, poetic, always fighting his curse. And Anne Rice's interview with the vampire just dives headfirst into that, doesn't it? Louis' endless brooding about existence, his moral struggles.
And Claudia, trapped as a child forever.
Yeah.
That adds such a unique layer of tragedy and complexity. It really bridges that gap between monster and, something almost humanly relatable, exploring the psychological cost of immortality.
And that internal struggle, that complexity, it paves the way for the 21st century where the vampire becomes, often romantic,
Yeah.
even heroic.
Yes, the romantic and heroic vampire really takes a... Now they're often the protagonists, protectors, lovers, finding some kind of salvation by fighting their own dark nature. They're not just monsters anymore. They embody desires we recognize.
Yeah, this is probably where, if you're listening, you might start seeing yourself, or maybe your own wishes reflected. Power, beauty, maybe overcoming your own dark side. Think of Edward in Twilight. He's literally fighting his instincts for love. And his vampirism even helps Bella, makes her stronger, healthier. The curse becomes a weird kind of blessing.
Or look at Rochelle Mead's Vampire Academy. That whole complex world, the Moroi and Strigoi, friendships, social structures within the vampire community.
And the Vampire Diaries, of course. The love triangle, the drama, vampires walking in daylight with magic rings. It all blurs those old lines, makes them much more relatable despite the fangs.
And what's really interesting is how this flexibility, this relatability, opened the door for exploring identity and relationships in new ways, especially sexuality. Cinematic vampires, well, they've been queer-coded, as the term goes, pretty much from the start, meaning they represented LGBTQ plus themes, subtly or not so subtly. The lesbian vampire in particular was actually one of the very first examples of queer-coded villainy in movies. It allowed filmmakers to hint at desires that were taboo at the time.
That's such a fascinating point. Even under heavy censorship, like the old Hays Code, you can still find hints. Like in Dracula's Daughter back in '36, that scene where the Countess looks at another woman, it was toned down, but the implication was there.
Exactly, it found ways to surface. And then by the 1970s, things became much more explicit. You had films like Jesus Franco's Vampirus Lesbos, which was very surreal and erotic. And Hammer Horror made the vampire lovers, based directly on Carmilla, much more overt. Plus, films like Daughters of Darkness from '71, very stylish, psychological, full of that tension between the female leads.
I know.
Yeah.
Modern TV and film seem way more open about it. AMC's Interview with the Vampire series, for instance.
Yeah.
It doesn't shy away at all from the gay relationship between Louis and Armand. It's right there, central. No hemming or hawing, as one source said.
Absolutely, and you see it elsewhere, too. True Blood had several prominent queer vampire characters, Russell Edgington, Pam de Beaufort, where their sexuality was just part of who they were. What We Do in the Shadows is brilliant with its pansexual vampires and Guillermo's whole journey. It's played for laughs, but it's celebratory, too. And something like Let the Right One In, with its young female vampire and her human companion, explores love, identity, being an outsider, with real depth and honesty, touching on complex feelings about gender and connection.
It does make you wonder, why vampires? Why are they such effective symbols for exploring themes like sexuality, themes that might otherwise face backlash or censorship? It seems like a really powerful way to challenge norms through storytelling.
I think it ties back to that core idea of the vampire as a mirror for social commentary.
Yeah.
Their fundamental otherness creates this psychological space. It allows creators to explore behaviors or anxieties that might feel too direct or controversial if they were just about regular humans. The supernatural acts like a filter, but the message still lands.
And that goes way beyond sexuality, right? Vampires have been stand-ins for all sorts of social issues. We talked about Nosferatu and anti-Semitism, already the vampire as the diseased, dangerous foreigner, a real tool for xenophobia.
And they've been used to critique class and capitalism, too. That's fascinating. Franco Moretti's Marxist reading of Dracula is powerful, seeing him as this solitary monopolist, literally sucking living labor. It echoes Marx's own descriptions of capital. Even Voltaire, way back, talked about brokers and businessmen sucking the blood of the people. And more recently, you have books like House of Hunger, where nobles literally drink servants' blood. It doesn't get much more direct as a metaphor for exploitation.
Wow, that's a potent metaphor that just keeps recurring. And they work for more personal struggles, too, like addiction or toxic relationships.
Oh, definitely. Liz Caron's novel Night's Edge uses vampirism as a kind of virus metaphor. It brings up those peak COVID memories of contagion, isolation. But it uses that to explore really difficult things like codependency, damaging relationships, trauma, where one person feels like they're being drained by another. Vampires needing that constant sustenance are just perfect symbols for addiction, for corruption, for relationships that just leave you feeling empty.
And let's not forget bigotry and otherness. Buffy the Vampire Slayer was genius at this. Think about Xander's attitude towards demons, calling Spike it, even when Spike shows loyalty, love.
Yeah, or his family calling Anya's demon friends circus folk.
Yeah.
It directly mirrors real-world prejudice against marginalized groups. The vampire or demon becomes this powerful way to talk about being an outsider, about facing prejudice.
So essentially, they're incredibly versatile, like a Swiss Army knife of monsters, as one source called them. They'd be addiction, corruption, romantic figures, action heroes. whatever the story needs.
Exactly. Which brings us to another interesting angle, the vampire siege story. That subgenre where it's not just one vampire, but a group attacking trapped humans.
Right, like Stephen King's Salem's Lot, where the vampires basically take over a whole town, or movies like 30 Days a Night in that isolated Alaskan town, or From Dusk Till Dawn in the Roadhouse, pure survival horror.
And Ryan Coogler's upcoming film, Sinners, looks set to take that siege idea in a really interesting new direction. It focuses on vampires attacking a black community trying to build its own space. The source mentions it touches on themes of American assimilation and the threat of being turned into this undead army. It sounds like it's using the siege not just for scares, but to explore really complex ideas about community identity, external threats, and cultural survival.
The myths also have these unique regional flavors, don't they, giving us different kinds of vampires. What about specifically American ones?
New Orleans is a great example. It's got its own rich folklore. The legend of the Casket Girls, those young French women supposedly arriving with vampires hidden in their luggage, housed at the Ursuline convent. And people still whisper about those attic shutters needing to be locked tight by dawn. Then there's a Comte Saint-Germain, this mysterious figure who supposedly never aged, never ate, just drank red wine from a chalice, vanished when accused of being a vampire. And Rice drew heavily on his legend for Louis. These stories show how local history blends with the myth.
It's truly global, isn't it? Vampiric figures pop up everywhere.
All over the world, yeah. Each reflecting local anxieties. You've got the Caribbean Secoyan, a witch who sheds her skin, flies as a fireball, drinks blood. The Aztec Cihuatejo, spirits of women dead in childbirth, stealing kids, driving men mad. Or in Asia, the Japanese Nukakubi, whose head detaches to hunt. Or the Malaysian Penanggalan, a floating head with trailing organs preying on pregnant women. It shows this universal fear of something draining life, but each culture shapes it with its own specific fears about death, gender, the supernatural.
And beyond folklore, we get modern takes that mash up genres or even try to give vampires a scientific basis.
Right. Abraham Lincoln. Vampire Hunter is a fun example of a genre mashup. Just throwing a historical figure into the mix shows how flexible the idea is. But then you get something really mind-bending, like Peter Watt's novel Blindsight. It offers this detailed scientific explanation. Vampires as an evolutionary offshoot. Smarter, faster, but with a neurological flaw, the crucifix glitch. Basically, an aversion to right angles, Euclidean geometry, which cripples them in our modern structured world. And they hibernate, potentially for centuries via cryogenics. It flips the script asking maybe we're the fluke and they were the apex predator. It totally reframes the myth.
Wow. Okay, what a journey we've covered today, from those primal fears, ancient folklore, gothic monsters, all the way to these complex, sometimes romantic, sometimes scientifically explained figures we have now.
It really underlines that the vampire's enduring power is its adaptability, doesn't it? It's like this perfect mirror, reflecting back whatever fears, desires, or social issues are current for humanity. As we change, as our world changes, the vampire changes right along with us.
So thinking about that,
Mm-hmm.
how they reflect our own changing times, what do you think the next evolution of the vampire might tell us about the world we're heading into? Something to think about maybe until our next deep dive.